Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So I thought it's a good time to take an early look into the changes currently happening on the PBE server because there's quite a few things happening there. Now keep in mind that this current patch is actually a 3-week cycle, so the new patch is not going to be hitting until next week as opposed to a regular cycle which would have been today. But regardless, let's take a quick early look into the current PBE cycle, see exactly what's happening there, and if you guys end up enjoying this video, then definitely hit it with that like button. So the first thing that I want to take a look at is something that's pretty interesting. It's essentially a new game mode. Now keep in mind that there's a very good chance that this game mode will not be coming out in the next PBE cycle, so when it goes to the live servers next week. But it is something that just recently got added into the PBE server, and it's pretty damn interesting. Essentially, Riot is adding a new game mode where you can play with friends in a tournament style draft or a tournament style mode. Now a user on Reddit by the name Mullins Weeble or something has actually been able to kind of draft up these icons and draft up all of these files and kind of compile it into what may look like the actual thing. Now the full details aren't fully clear, but what we know so far, as you can see from these pictures, from picture 1 for instance, is you choose which tournament that you want to participate in. If there's only one, apparently it immediately drops you into this screen where you get some general information and the ability to create a roster, whether it's with your friends or other people that you essentially scouted. The second picture here is actually more or less an FAQ, just giving you a quick rundown of how everything can look like. The third picture is the one that shows you how you can create a new roster and you can get dropped into your manage view and where you can kind of manage your roster as well. In the fourth picture, it actually shows you just a bunch of different icons, ones that I'm assuming you can unlock and probably even use to obviously make your actual team logo to represent your team whenever you're playing against other teams in this tournament draft or tournament cup. But the next picture also does show and kind of confirm that you will be winning and unlocking very specific or special icons through winning tournament game modes, whether it's getting first place, second place, maybe third place, that you can most likely only unlock through this specific game mode. The next three pictures here are just examples of how the kind of lobby looks like, you know, whether you win, you lose, how your current team can look like, so you can kind of view them very quickly. Maybe if you view another team's roster, this is more or less how it'll look like as well. And the final picture here is going to be something that looks to be more or less somewhat of a scouting ground where you can take a look at different players, individual stats per team, and kind of just see which players are performing well, which ones seem to be the kind of MVP of the current team, and you can essentially use this to just look at other teams and see who is good, who is not so good, and more or less just get more information about a team. So this is actually pretty damn cool, and it's going to be somewhat of an amateur way to play in a tournament style League of Legends game mode, which I think is a fantastic idea. I do kind of question how popular it will be as to, you know, how many people actually care playing League of Legends in a tournament style, but I feel like it's a pretty cool idea, and I really truly hope that it does work out really well. But next up, let's actually take a look at some changes happening to champions, whether it's a buff or a nerf. And the first champion I want to quickly touch on is going to be Aatrox. So Aatrox for the longest time now has been in a very kind of peculiar state, we'll say. You know, I mean, he's been pretty much forgotten to where Riot essentially kind of reworked him to where he kind of became a bit more popular, but then suddenly he actually wasn't really that strong. Then Riot buffed him again, then it wasn't enough, then they buffed him again and still wasn't enough. Now they're buffing him again. But at the end of the day, he is going to be scheduled for a rework, which hopefully will be coming pretty soon. But regardless, the buff happening to Aatrox is as follows. He can no longer be stopped during the second part of his Q, only the first part. So the part where he goes up into the air initially can be interrupted, but the part where he's finally diving down onto his target cannot. And following this, his ultimate's attack range has also been increased by 50, which is quite a bit, and it should definitely feel like quite a difference when you activate the ultimate, because now you can not only attack your target obviously from farther away, but chasing them down and even kiting them should be that much easier. But with all this being said, I mean, regardless, I don't really feel like Aatrox is gonna be just back into the meta because of this. I mean, these buffs aren't really all that substantial, they're nice, but they're not gonna make too much of a difference, and at the end of the day, I feel like everyone is just waiting for the final Aatrox rework. Now, following a buff happening to Aatrox, there's actually a buff happening to Azir. Now, much like Aatrox, Azir has been pretty bad recently, right? Not many people play him, and if you do play him, usually it's in pretty high elo to where people have really just experienced and really know how to play this champion quite a bit, or are essentially a one-trick. But if you're someone that only plays Azir here and there, you know, every now and then the chances of you playing him now are just much lower, because the chances of actually winning the game with him is just significantly lower as well. But also, much like Aatrox, even though he's getting a buff now to his ultimate, he's also scheduled for a rework, and luckily for us, that rework should be coming next patch. So expect about a week and a half for the rework for Azir to finally hit the PBE server. But regardless, the current buff to Azir is as follows. His ultimate's damage has actually been increased at rank 2 and also rank 3, but rank 3 has actually added a whole 150 base damage. Now, even though adding 150 base damage to his ultimate sounds pretty damn good, keep in mind it is at rank 3. By the time you're rank 3, again, that is level 16. The chances of everyone else being around level 16, 15, 17 is pretty damn high unless you're just severely ahead. So the point I'm trying to make is the fact that increasing his ultimate by 150 at rank 3 isn't as big as it actually sounds, because by then, the chances of people having more HP items and just having more base HP in general is obviously pretty damn high. So in a way, it sort of nullifies it being increased by 150 damage. Now, don't get me wrong, I mean, obviously this is a buff regardless. Obviously, it'll still do more damage, but I feel like it's not going to be as much more damage as one may think. Nor will this most likely be enough to truly bring Azir back into the meta. I mean, he did recently receive another buff, which was pretty good. I mean, and it's definitely welcoming. But at the end of the day, we are just waiting for the big Azir changes coming to the next patch, so just stay tuned for that. But next up, we have some pretty massive changes happening to Ornn. Now, Ornn is of course the newest champion in League of Legends, but to really no surprise, Ornn isn't really performing as well as I'm sure he would like to, so Riot is actually giving him pretty major buffs. Now keep in mind, some of these buffs I'll be going over are hotfixes, which does mean that they have been already pushed to the live server, but there's going to be a whole lot of other things to talk about regardless. So the first one is going to be a very slight bug fix that just fixes moving the camera on the minimap while foraging, which I mean doesn't really matter too much, but I thought I'd mention it regardless. Now it seems like his passive that lets himself and his allies buy those extra items, the one where it upgrades it to a further state, like for instance for Infinity Edge or Trinity Force or whatever, apparently now that's only available once Ornn reaches level 13. Now of course this technically is a nerf if you really think about it, but at the end of the day it actually isn't one that really matters, and the reason I say that is because, well, you really shouldn't be upgrading your items using Ornn's passive regardless of whether or not you can do it prior to Ornn being level 13, because a lot of the times the stats that you get for the gold that you invest, so for instance 1000 gold to upgrade Infinity Edge, it just is not worth it. You don't get enough for the gold value, especially at that stage of the game. It's a lot better to be working on another new item, which will not only give you a bunch of really good stats regardless, but it'll give you new stats, new synergies, new ways for the items to work together, rather than just getting a couple of extra AD on Infinity Edge and calling it a day. But here's where the buffs truly come in, so the first of which is going to be to his Q. The pillar spawn has been lowered from 1.25 seconds to 1.125 seconds. At the end of the day, honestly, not that much, and I would like to see it maybe at 1 second instead, because it does take a little too long to spawn in my opinion, and this is something I actually did mention when I was playing Ornn on the PBE server. It just took way too long for that Q to finally come out of the ground. But at least Riot is going towards the correct direction and making it quicker regardless. But on top of this, it also now has a small push on it when it spawns, which obviously means if you correctly use your Q ability, you can actually push the opponent towards you if you put it ahead of them, which is good, because on top of this, the push, I'm assuming is going to be considered more or less a knockback, will also CC them for long enough for you to potentially synergize that with your E ability into your Q, thus further CCing them, which could be pretty damn cool. Next up, there's also a pretty significant buff happening to his W ability, which in my opinion is probably his best non-ultimate ability. The first of which is going to be the W length and the width have both been increased by 50, which is pretty damn good. Even now at the moment, I feel like landing his W isn't all that bad. The only thing I don't like about his W is the fact that it feels very difficult to land the last part, the part that actually really matters. But the second part of the buff to his W is where it'll make this a little bit easier, because now it actually sets your movement speed from 35% to 50% of the normal movement speed whenever you're using your W, or essentially channeling it. Thus, this will make it a lot easier to actually stick onto your target, thus also of course making it easier to land the final part of the W, again, the one that truly matters. But there's yet another buff to his W, and this one is actually quite significant. The fire has been changed from dealing the enemy's current health to dealing the enemy's maximum health and damage. So this obviously is much better, right? I mean, obviously being max HP is always better than current HP because current HP scales down based on the HP of the target, or in other words, how weak they currently are. So this is definitely a very welcome change to his W in terms of the damage it'll now deal, and it'll make him just deal more damage overall whenever using this ability. Following this, his E ability received a change where it states no longer knocks back on charge through. I'm not entirely sure what this means because I actually just went onto the live server into training mode, spammed my E ability on a target dummy, and there was no knockback regardless of whether or not I charged through and there's no wall or I charged through and hit a wall. So I'm not 100% sure what this means exactly, but the change is listed on the PvE server. But the final thing is his ultimate. The RAM maximum speed has actually been increased from 1050 to 1200, so a 150 increase, which is definitely really good because it'll be that much easier now to actually land your ultimate onto the targets, and the faster it goes, the less time the enemy team has to react to the way you use it, whether it's the one coming in or the second part of it where you hit it back to the enemy team and it knocks up every single person hit. But like I said, he's receiving massive buffs, so there's actually a couple more things because they actually added one new item but also nerfing another one you can currently upgrade. So let's take a look at those next. The first one I'll talk about is going to be Zhonya's Paradox, which if you haven't guessed is the upgraded version of Zhonya's Hourglass. Just like the other big items like Infinity Edge or Trinity Force, it will cost you 1000 gold to upgrade it using Ornn's passive, but it'll offer you an extra 30 AP and an extra 15 armor, which really isn't all that bad and it's pretty much on par with all the other 1000 gold upgrades. So now mages have two options, whether or not they want to go for the Rabadons being a lot more offensive, or if they want to instead upgrade the Zhonya's Hourglass and be a bit more defensive. Following this, they also ended up nerfing the upgraded version of Circlet of the Iron Solari, where now it'll just simply shield for a bit less, and it has a new effect where it states the shield amount is reduced to 0% if the target has been affected by another locket of the Iron Solari in the last 5 seconds. Now the last thing I want to quickly talk about is going to be Nautilus because he has a new effect on his Q ability now where if you use his Q but instead you hit terrain, you get refunded 50% of the mana cost, which is pretty damn good because now his mana cost on his Q is 60 at all ranks. But either way guys, that's going to be it for this video. There you have it, some massive changes coming to the PvE server, an early look into it, so let me know what you think about it down below. If you enjoyed the video, definitely hit it with that like button. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you for Journey to Masters tomorrow. Peace.